Okay, so as we've been going through the production of our project file since almost day one in here, the final export for our animation has always been a GIF. Boo, GIFs. They're great as we kind of learn the process of animation, but now it's time to graduate from the GIF and start working in real images, right? Animation or Animate, as you guys are well aware of at this point, does a really great job of playing back these drawings. It gives us a really organic timeline that's better than most. Okay, not perfect in any sense, but definitely better than most. But we need to start incorporating other apps into our ecosystem, if you will, so that we can take what we build here in Animate and send it over to another application, and vice versa. We want to create a round trip. Animate, and we saw this last week with our little block out of our characters, does a great job for us just to explore how these simple shapes and these simple poses can create the illusion of something more complex, right? What it doesn't do a really hot job of is, unfortunately, illustrating, right? The drawing engine in Animate is way, way, way thumbs down. So we need to start getting our frames out of Animate, okay? So we're going to take Stephanie's animation here, of which she did a fantastic job, and we're going to get it out of Animate and into an image format that we now then can start to play with in other applications. And this is something that you can do in either Illustrator if you're really strong with Illustrator, or if you're much stronger in Photoshop, I suggest doing it in there as well. Photoshop, I think, has probably the best illustration engine on the face of the planet. It's really, really, really good. So we want to bring that into the fold a little bit as we start to create a production pipeline, okay? As animators, at the end of the day, we're just trying to create a stack of drawings, but we're trying to get through to that exploration stage as fast as we can, right? So we can actually physically start committing our drawings. So as you guys are well aware of, getting our animations out in that GIF format is really easy, right? Just export animated GIF, right? Does anyone understand almost the legacy behind the animated GIF? How did this start, the animated GIF? I'm actually surprised the animated GIF is still around. There was a time, if I go back maybe 10 years ago, I probably would have told you, I would have put a stake in the animated GIF and said, you're done, we're never going to see you again, right? The animated GIF, or the CompuServe GIF, as it's called officially, is one of those file formats from the beginning of the internet.
Like when we were back when the internet was still relatively new, we had a computer class, and one of the things they would sit there and talk about is, okay, time to make your own website. Because that was the thing, you were learning how to make a website.
Yep.
And naturally, one of the things people would do, where's GIF? I want a GIF that I can put on the side where it has a character bouncing up and down, diamonds spinning around.
You got it.
Like that was it.
Yep, you got it. The GIF was really created as a way for us to create movie files, okay, or small, simple animations for the web. It is a web format, and it's a heavily, heavily compressible format. Actually, one of the reasons I wanted to use Stephanie's example is because you see the really intense compression, okay? If you look at Stephanie's raw Animate file, look at that blue background. It's a nice, solid blue, but what we get in the compressed GIF is not anything that looks like that. Check it out. Can you guys see those dots in there? Okay, that is compression. You know, the file format is trying to crunch this file down to as small as it possibly can so that we can put it on the web. Okay? This is called dithering when we see all those dots, right? And we generally hate them. Okay, this is not a professional file format. It's always, from its conception, been a distribution format. What's keeping the GIF around? It's funny. Why is it funny? Yeah, there it is. Okay, yeah. It's funny because they're like memes, and we all like text them to each other. We post them on, Facebook and all that jazz. Those are GIFs. Okay, the reason why we do that is because they're small. It's a single file. It's not. We don't have to go to like embed a YouTube page or anything like that. Since the GIF was around at the dawn of the internet age, it's pretty instantaneously accepted on every major web platform. Okay. But in the professional video world, in the professional cinema world, we want to walk as fast as we possibly can away from the GIF. Okay, as fast as we can. It's not a good format. if you ever give me a GIF, if we're cutting together a film and you give me a GIF, I'm going to give it right back to you and say, I can't use this, right? This is an unusable file format. So we now need to start exploring how we can get our animations out of Animate and into a series of formats that are usable, both in the larger sense that we're trying to incorporate Photoshop, but let's maybe pretend that Stephanie's like really cool with this and she's done and she wants to cut this into her portfolio or put it on YouTube. We still need to get it out of the GIF format and into a standard movie file. Okay? So let's start talking about how we're going to do this. First and foremost, let's jump back over into Animate and look at our options. Okay? So File, Export, we're still going to go into that File, Export. Whoops. Okay. So we have some options in here. It's really important to understand the differences between them. And if the guys and gals at Adobe are listening, they really, really need to make a change. Okay? This is a pretty misleading change. Of course, export image, what's that going to do? Single frame. We have, and I don't know how many frames Stephanie has in our timeline, but we have more than one. I need to get every single one of those frames out of Animate and into their own individual movie file. In every sense, what we're trying to create here is called an image sequence. If you go all the way back to the dawn of the 20th century, okay, right when the cinema age was truly beginning, you took a piece of 35mm film and you hold it up like this against the light. What are you seeing in that long strip of film negative?
All the different frames.
Yeah, and more specifically, a whole series of individual pictures, right? Film is an illusion. It really is. Every part of the filmmaking process is distilled and reduced down to a single picture. We are creating a whole series of individual pictures that, when played back at a frame rate, creates the illusion of a moving picture, a moving image. That's it. That's the trick. Persistence of vision in our brain allows for this trick to happen. So I want to kind of start to participate in that pipeline a little bit. I want to get every frame of my animation into an individual picture so that I can incorporate that image sequence into a much more professional cinema sense. Okay? So I don't want to have to go in and export out each and every individual frame. That's, thumbs down. Not happening. Because let's see, how many frames does Stephanie have? She has almost 60, right? I'm not going in, export image, then move my playhead to frame 2, export. I'm not doing that 60 times. I'm not doing that, right? I'm going to use the power of the computers that are thinking machines. We're going to let them kind of automate this process for us. So we're not going to do export image. We have two options here that are new. We have export movie, and then more importantly, we have export video. And this is, they really need to change this, right? Because, in the pedestrian sense, what's the difference between a movie and a video? Yeah, I would say not very much. I'm going to have a 2-hour video and a 2-hour movie. There's not a whole lot in this day and age, right? This is labeled very, very poorly, but let's define what these two export options really do, because they have a purpose, okay? If we choose export movie, here's what we get. I'm going to put it on the desktop. That's the name of our file. Let's just shorten this. Let's just do walk cycle. Okay, but look down here. File format. PNG sequence, okay? GIF sequence, JPEG sequence, and then a Swift movie, okay? Animate has its root, its DNA is Flash, Adobe Flash, okay? The Swift movie file, okay, was how we published animations to the web, okay? But most importantly, the sequence is what we're after, okay? Now I want you to see what happens here. I'm going to leave it. I'll do a JPEG sequence, and I'm going to create a new folder on my desktop. I'm going to just call this test anim. Okay. Now watch what happens when I hit the save button. It's going to these are just quality settings. Just make sure if you're doing JPEGs, just make sure that's at 100. There's no reason to compress a JPEG. JPEGs are already compressed. We don't want to compress them anymore. Hit OK. Then it takes over. Magic. It's done something. Let's see exactly what the computer has done for us. I'm going to go back to that folder. Let's see if we can find it right here. It is. And if we examine the contents of that folder, check it out. It's not just one file. It's every frame in its own individual file. So here's frame 1 as its own individual frame. Here's 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. You actually hold the arrow, down arrow, and kind of get a good kind of flip book, if you will, of your animation, right? Now, each and every frame of our timeline has been popped out into its own image file. And this is something that we can use. This is something that we absolutely can and should use over in Photoshop or After Effects or Media Encoder. When we have an image sequence, the opportunities start to widen, open a lot of doors, okay? Let me show you the inverse. So this is the goal. We want an image sequence. Our entire professional animation pipeline is centered around an image sequence, okay? In the 3D sense, let's see. I think I may actually have some renders on this machine. Let's see. Yeah, so even for me in the 3D world, okay, I create image sequences, okay? I'm not creating a movie file, a video, an MOV or an MP4. I initially create an image sequence, and then I convert that image sequence into an MOV. Let's look at the alternative here and understand how it's different. So we want export movie. Export video, something very different. And this is why they need to change it, right? This is incredibly misleading. If we did export video, this is the popover that we'll get inside of our screen, okay? And if you look at it, it says stop exporting, convert video in Adobe Media Encoder. This is going to create a movie file for us, but it doesn't allow us to get that image sequence, okay? It skips a very important step for us. We want these image sequences as much as we can. It gives us flexibility, and it allows us to choose what's going to happen next. If we just send it over to the Media Encoder, which is a video compression engine, it's going to create a file for us. Let me show you what this looks like. I'm just going to put it on my desktop. Call this test anim. Oops. And look what it's going to create now. It's going to eventually create a QuickTime movie. Export. It actually exports a SWF, and then behind the scenes, look, a new app is launching. This is called Adobe Media Encoder. We'll come back to this here in a minute. It's actually going to be a central, or it's going to play a central part in the production of our final product. I can't publish a SWF file to the web easily. I don't want to publish a GIF because the quality is so bad, and it doesn't necessarily honor the frame rate also, right? The only way to get the quality that we're after and the frame rate that we desire is to get it into an MOV file, to publish an image sequence and then convert that image sequence into a movie file. This is how every professional animation studio on the face of the planet does it. Here's our test animation. If I hit the play button, we'll come back and talk about this here in a second. What we get in this entire sequence is an MP4. But it has all of our layers on there, right? Not hot. I love your block out, by the way, Stephanie. Really good. I didn't notice that before. Really good. Good stuff. So this pipeline of creating a video in Animate is not at all what we want. It creates some problems. It makes it more complex, and it really does pop out everything, right? Because there's layers over here. Check it out. There's 1, 2, 3. There's 3 layers that she turned off, but when we exported out that video file, it turned them on and exported everything. Thumbs down. So what we want to incorporate into our production pipeline is this idea of exporting out a video. Or excuse me, exporting out a movie. Even I get mixed up because it's so silly, okay? When we export out a movie, we get an image sequence, which is what we are after. We want a whole series of individual pictures, because once we can distill our entire complex Animate timeline into a whole series of pictures, now we can do whatever we want with them. They're just pictures like any other picture. We can edit them. We can add on top of them. We can use them as the foundation for a new animation or the next version of this animation over in Photoshop, right? It puts us in the driver's seat to determine what happens next, right? And as artists, we want to make sure that we're in control of our production pipeline, that the tools aren't forcing us down a very specific path, okay? Let me show you a little bit more about where we're going. We're going to open up Photoshop here in a second. Our entire world works around image sequences at every level, even on the video side, okay? If you're a high-end cinematographer filming the next Star Wars movie, the file that you create, they're not MOV files or MP4 files. When you're on the set of Star Wars and you hit the record button, your camera is actually creating a whole series of very high resolution and very high, super high quality images. They're individual raw cinema D&G files that contain just a tremendous amount of pixel resolution and color information, right? And then our video editing applications take all those individual pictures and they combine them into an image sequence, and that's what we cut together instead of our editing apps like Avid and Premiere Pro and Final Cut Pro, okay? On the 3D side, which I kind of live in for the most part, we render out image sequences exclusively. Actually, we don't even have the functionality to render out MOV sequences, right? Does anyone know why? Some of you guys know why, because you've taken my 3D classes. Why do we do that? Why don't we even give the 3D artist the ability to create an MOV file, a movie file? There's got to be a reason for it. It gives us the functionality to edit an individual image. These renders take forever. If you take my 3D animation classes, you will learn very directly the bottleneck in our entire pipeline is when we hit the render button and we ask the computer to draw a whole series of pictures. This takes a while. It's a lot of information the computer has to digest to create these pictures, so it takes a while. I don't know what it is now. The numbers have changed. But for the longest time, the record holder for the longest render per frame came on the first Transformers film, a.k.a. the good Transformers film. Did anyone see Bumblebee, by the way? No? I want to see Bumblebee because I think it has some potential. I'm hopeful, right? So in the first Transformer film, there's kind of an iconic shot. It's when the Autobots first arrive to planet Earth, and they jump in their car forms, and they're coming down, all 5 of them are coming down that long brick alleyway to meet Shia LaBeouf and what's-her-face that I can't stand? Can't stand Megan Fox. She drives me crazy. Crazy. Anyways. So once they get down to the end of the alleyway, right, all 5 Autobots transform at the exact same time. This is the first time as cinemagoers that we see a transformation happen on screen, right? And so we have the render camera right next to the Autobots. So you're seeing the high-resolution models with the high-resolution textures and the high-resolution hero animations, right? Because when the camera's close, you're going to see everything. And the magicians at ILM did a fantastic job in crafting this shot. But it took forever to render, right? And it's a pretty long, epic shot, like everything is with Michael Bay, right? And I think if I remember correctly, there's this huge like pan and tilt, and as the camera sweeps by, every Autobot kind of gets a moment as they do their hero animation, right? As they transform into the robots. And of course, we end up on our gigantic master shot of Optimus Prime, and you know, this is the moment that we've all been waiting for. Okay? Does anyone want to take a guess how long it took ILM to render one frame? Now this is like a 10-second shot, right? It's a long shot. One frame. Luckily, it's not a month or two per frame. So it's like if it's a 10-second shot, we got 240 of these things that the computer needs to render, right? 2 days to render one picture, right? So when you're ILM or Digital Domain or DNEG that just won an Academy Award, okay, you're only gonna ask the computer to draw that final frame one time, because that's probably all you can afford, right? Since the resources are so intense, okay? So what happens if you spend 2 days drawing a picture? There's something wrong with it. What are you going to do? Are you going to spend another 2 days rendering that picture? Maybe, depending on what's wrong with it. But if it's a small little error, like a little firefly, like a little hot spot on a pixel, or maybe you see some grain in the background that you're trying to get rid of, you're not going to ask the computer to re-render again. You're going to do some post-processing on that picture. It's just a picture, right? I can take it into Photoshop and clone out that one little problem, right? I don't have to ask the computer to draw it over again. I just need to fix the frame that was created, okay? So there's a huge advantage of working with these individual image files, these image sequences, okay? Because it distills it down into the simplest moving part, a picture. It adds kind of a couple extra steps, but it gives us this tremendous flexibility in our sequence. Going back to Stephanie for a second here, maybe there was a small little error in the frame coming out of Animate. She doesn't necessarily have to go back into Animate, fix the the small little illustration error, re-export. Just bring that one picture into Photoshop, clone it out, fix it, draw on top of it. We'll never know the difference because it's always just going to get back down to a picture at the end of the day. Okay? So let's take a look at how we can start incorporating Photoshop a little bit more directly into our sequence. Okay? Now, naturally, I just got Photoshop open. If you're not used to working with Photoshop, it's a pretty easy application. It's actually fundamentally not too different from Animate. It's kind of one of the big benefits of working in this like Adobe umbrella, is all the apps generally kind of work the same, which is kind of nice. As artists, this is an atmosphere that makes it very easy for us to travel between these two different applications. Okay? So if we just simply do File, Open, let's go find my image sequence. There it is. I'm just going to grab frame 1. Boof. Okay, now the previous user fired off the crop tool. There it is. So there's our image. And now we can do whatever we want to it, right? We can add more layers. We can paint on top of it, right? So down here in the bottom right-hand corner, this is our layer stack. In Animate, we have a timeline that has almost the exact same icons that allow us to add additional layers on top of this, okay? Same icon we have over in Animate. Same thing here in Photoshop. Create a new empty layer. Now on this new empty layer, we can do whatever we want, right? We can grab the brush tool and blah, 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 and we're on our way. Okay? So we're free and encouraged to go in and completely change all this, right? However, I don't want to have to make a change on every single frame. What if I have 60 of these things that I need to manage? That could be a lot. That could be a lot. So let's look at some alternative ideas here. I'm going to create a new document. And I need this new document to match perfectly the canvas size, the stage size that we set over in Animate. Does anyone remember the size of the stage that we're working on in Animate? Yeah, you're really close. 1280 by 720. You guys were right there. Okay, so we need to make sure that we're using that exact same dimensions. So 1280 by 720. The resolution for us doesn't really matter. This is something that's entirely directed towards the graphic design industry. This has everything to do with how many pixels are per 1 inch on a piece of paper. The higher that number, the higher the quality of the print's going to be. We don't care about that so much because we're never going to be printing our images, right? Point being, you could leave this at 300, but for the most part in the video world or in the cinema world, just put it to 72. We're on our way. Okay, makes the file size a little bit bigger, or a little bit smaller, excuse me. Then we'll hit OK. Cool. Flipping between the tabs here shows us very directly that mission accomplished. Now we have a new project file that matches the dimensions of what we were creating over in Animate. Okay? So now here's the challenge. We need to get all these pictures into Animate. Now maybe I should not have used Stephanie's because she has 60 individual frames, which is going to be a lot to manage, right? But check it out. We actually import video frames to layers, okay? This is going to take every one of those sequences and put it, please don't crash, Photoshop, please don't crash. It's going to put it in sequence for us as a new layer, okay? So instead of having 60 individual project files, we have one project file with 60 layers inside of it, okay? That allows us to edit and change and work pretty fast. If hopefully, there we go. Let's do it real fast. Photoshop is choosing not to work on me right now. Come on, Photoshop. You can do it. All right. Okay, so it's taking me back to that root folder. Okay, I'm just going to grab the folder itself and hit open. Oops, it doesn't like JPEGs. Okay, it no likes the JPEGs, as it shouldn't. Just want to make sure. Yeah. Video frames to layer. No, it just doesn't like the JPEG. Let's go back over to Animate real fast and pop it out into something different. Export. Which one of these are we going to use? Movie. No likey the video. Let's do movie. Okay. And JPEGs are not so hot. PNGs are awesome, by the way. Colors, yep, that's fine. Yep, all looks good. Boom. I always like to do a good double check, make sure it worked the way I thought it was going to work before I move on. Yep. Look at that lovely solid blue field. No dithering, no dots. We likey. So now if we jump back over into Photoshop and try this again. Watch it not work. It's not going to work. Why is it not working? Oh, you know what? It's looking for a video file, not an image sequence. I'm in the wrong section. I apologize. No, that should have worked. Load files into stack. I think that's what it is. I apologize. Let's do a folder. Come on now. Oh, it's loading in the background. I'm not being patient enough. There it goes. Now it's doing it. It's going to take a minute or so to do it. The other option would actually take a video file like an MOV and take every frame out of that video file and put it as a layer instead of Photoshop. This way it allows us to preserve 100% of the quality. The moment that you pop any image file into a video file, you're compressing that image. You're losing quality. So we want to make sure that we're not losing quality until we are done with this entire process. And again, maybe I should not have chosen an illustration that has 60 frames on it. It's taking a little bit longer than I would have liked. So if you look closely at what Photoshop is doing, it's opening every file individually, and this is basically doing a copy-paste between it, and it's automating the entire function, because I'm not going to do this 60 individual times. Boo, right? Now, I would only do this, there it is, I would only do this when I'm done with the animation exploration stage, right? When I'm ready to physically go in and start making some drawings, okay? Start making some final drawings, or drawing over on top of something that we already have. If you look over here in my my layer stack now, check it out. This is excellent. Now I have every frame as its own individual layer. Okay. Here's a great power user shortcut. I wish someone would have showed this to me a long time ago, especially in the context of using Photoshop with animation frames. I just want to work on one frame. Okay. Oftentimes, we want to be able to see pretty quickly what's, kind of do some simple onion skinning, if you will. I got 60 layers that are all on right now. The visibility icon's enabled. Maybe I just want to see this one frame, okay? If you hold down the Option key and click on the visibility icon, it solos that layer, and it turns 59 other layers off automatically, which is kind of nice. We don't have an official onion skin. Remember, at this point, the animation stage is done. Now we're in the cleanup stage. We're trying to draw on top and make good drawings. So we don't necessarily need the onion skinning. We have kind of like a poor man's onion skinning, where we just go in and change the layers. Opacity. Stephanie's animation is probably a little bit slow at the beginning, so we may not see the effect of this. But if I have two layers on, I certainly could take this top one and change its opacity to like 50%. Yeah, let's find a really extreme example of that. A frame that's very different. Yeah, let's do those two. So I'm on frame 17, and then frame 1 are visible. Yeah, so now I can kind of get a poor man's onion skinning. You kind of manually go in and adjust it. But consider the purpose of this. Animation, or Animate is used to block out our movements. Photoshop is to create perfect drawings of those movements, right? If you so chose. I know some of you guys are ninjas at Photoshop, and I want to make sure that you continue to use that entire production pipeline as a major tenet of your workflow, because Photoshop has the best. It really does have the best drawing tools. Animate's got the great animation tools. Photoshop has horrible animation tools, like god-awful, like you don't want to use it, right? So by automating this process, okay, so by File, Automate, ImScripts, where was it? Load files into stack. Okay, that's going to take every frame in that folder and put it as a layer inside of Photoshop for you to do with what you choose to do with it. Okay, so that's how to get all of our animation frames into Photoshop, right? It'd be great at the end of the day to get all these animation frames out of Photoshop. Okay, Photoshop does an excellent, excellent job of exporting our animation frames back to Animate if we'd like. Okay, check it out. Let me show you how this works. All right, so I'm just going to do File, Save, and I'm just going to call this Test Anim, and I'm going to leave it as a Photoshop document, right? Because the cool thing about the Photoshop document, it is basically 100% of the quality of all the layers, right? It's not going to compress anything. It's almost a perfect reproduction of what we see here inside of Photoshop. It's great. In addition, it keeps all your layers. Yeah, so this now turns into a master file, okay, with all that layer information. Every single frame of your animations in this Photoshop document. I'm going to save it on my desktop real fast as a PSD. Get used to seeing PSD files in our world. They're everywhere. They really are. It's one of for us as animators, the Photoshop document is a staple for us. So get used to seeing PSD Photoshop document. Okay, not to be confused, little known Photoshop fact with the PSB. Do you guys ever know there's a PSB? I was unaware that there's a PSB until about 5 years ago. I was talking with an artist that was doing some wonderful work on that was going to end up on a billboard, and he was doing all of it in Photoshop. He was using photographs as a big part of his design. So he was forced to use Photoshop. He couldn't bring it all over into Illustrator. And the resolution of a billboard, I mean, it's huge, right? I mean, these are things that are like 30 feet by 60 feet. They're gigantic, right? So his Photoshop document had to match that size, and he had to use the Photoshop big file format. Because I guess there is a file limit on the PSD that I've never hit, but he was running into because of his billboard. Anyways, okay. So how are we going to use this? Because this Photoshop document now has every single layer, okay? Maybe I want to bring this back over into Animate to see how it's working, right? To see if it is, in fact, doing what I want it to do. Maybe those edits are done, and I want to see how it's moving, okay? So check it out. File New, same preset that we've been using the entire semester long, but now we're going to do one small change, okay? We're going to import this Photoshop document, okay? Now there's two different kind of forks in the road that you can kind of navigate. You can initially create all your animation frames in Photoshop and then bring them in, or you can do the round trip that we've been working with today, right? You start in Animate, go to Photoshop, then come back to Animate. Right? That works too. Either way works. Okay? But what we're going to do, and I'm going to get rid of my my action safe. I'm going to File, Import, and then File, Import to Stage. Okay? Now check this out. This is so cool. This is so cool. You guys are going to love this, right? This automates the entire system. It's not that difficult. You'll get an option to find the, I put it on my desktop, find the file. There it is, and hit Open, okay? Now you're going to get this thing where it's going to allow you to select all individual frames that you want to import to stage. I don't want just one picture. I want all 60 of them, right? All of them. I'm being greedy today. So I need to make sure that Select All Layers is on. Bloop, okay? And check it out. Down here at the bottom, this is the part that people miss. Convert layers Okay, we have a couple options depending on who's worked on your machine before. Okay, we have animate layers, single animate layer, or keyframe. Okay, what do we want? Keyframes. That way, every layer in your Photoshop document gets assigned to its individual animate keyframe, or drawing as we've been calling it, in our animate timelines. Let's do it real fast. It's so cool. It's going to take a minute. There they all are. Okay, if you look down at our timeline, it's put it in order. Oh, it looks like it's in reverse order. And that's just a numbering thing. But we can see it in backwards, right?
Isn't there a way to click on all of those in reverse the order?
Yeah, and we can you can do it a couple different ways. Larger point being is that now we have all of those animation layers in Animate, or excuse me, all of those Photoshop layers in Animate as individual keyframes. Okay.
Just out of curiosity, what does it look like when you have it animated backwards? I mean, since they have it,
Cool, huh?
it's like the most worried moonwalk I've ever seen.
Yeah. All right. So one thing that we need to do, so that's how we round trip, okay? Because we want to start bringing Photoshop into the fold a little bit here. But we also want to do it in an intelligent way that preserves our quality. We don't want to compress the video. We don't want to see those dithering dots that we saw earlier, right? That's mission failure for us. We want to retain all the lovely illustrative quality that you guys have created, okay? Final step, and I know that there's a lot of steps in the sequence, and I apologize for that, is that we need to get it into an MOV file. Okay, so here's what I would like you to do. Here, I'll do this. I'm going to help you guys out. We're going to practice for a second. Okay, we're going to. Stephanie, would you mind if I provided everyone with your animation frames? Yeah. Okay, great. Check it out. Through the power of remote desktop, I'm going to put this exact same file that I'm working with on your desktops. Okay, so I want you guys to practice this process of creating an MOV file in Media Encoder. Practice makes perfect. All right. All right. In approximately 10 seconds, you're going to have a folder sitting on your desktop with all those animation frames. Okay? It should be there. It should be on your desktop. Okay? Just hit return. There's no password to enter in.
Okay, I hit cancel.
Does everyone have that file, that folder? With all of Stephanie's wonderful animation frames? Okay, if you open it up, check it out. It's the image sequence, right? It's the image sequence that came right out of Photoshop. We're going to pretend, just for illustration purposes, that we are done with our entire sequence here, that we are ready to rock and roll, okay? And we have done file, export, movie, and we've popped out an image sequence, okay? For your homework this week, which is going to be a run, you're going to be creating a movie file. Not a GIF, not an image sequence, but a final compiled movie file. So I want us to practice going through this process, okay? So we get some experience in class before we walk away, and I ask you guys to do it on your own, okay? So we've exported out the image sequence by choosing export movie. Let's hide animate, and now we need to physically do something with it, right? We need to get this into a movie file. Thus enter Media Encoder, Adobe Media Encoder. Media Encoder is part of the Adobe Creative Cloud. It's a professional video compression application, okay? I am all about using the right tool for the right job, right? Media Encoder is a one-trick pony. It does one thing masterfully, and that's compress video files. Because we can't send this image sequence to Facebook. I can't post it to Instagram. I can't post it to YouTube. There's nothing I can do with it because it's just a collection of photographs. I want to get it into a file that I can share or maybe incorporate into a film. Okay? So we need to get it into a movie file. This is the last step, right? So let's open up Media Encoder. This is the icon. It may be in your doc. If it's not in your dock, you can open up your applications directory, and it is right there. Media Encoder. It's a big app. Go ahead and launch the app. It's going to take a moment or two to initialize. It's a big daddy app, okay? There's a huge video architecture on the back end that it's loading, so we got to be patient with it. Mine's already up and running, but I'll give you guys a couple seconds so you can catch up. Yeah. What you got? Oh, yeah, so go down to your applications folder. And then Media Encoder. Okay, and there's the app itself. There you go. It takes forever to load, doesn't it? It's amazing how long it takes for this one app to launch. But that's okay. This is where you go check your email. Hang out on Discord for a second. Apparently that's a thing now. That came out of nowhere, right? Discord? For me, it came out of nowhere. All of a sudden, people are on Discord. I'm like, what? What is Discord?
Pretty useful. I've used it for like school projects and stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, it kind of feels like Slack. You guys, are you familiar with Slack or like WhatsApp? Yeah, kind of a messaging app. But you can also share files and communicate with people. You make groups and private conversations and stuff. It's not too dissimilar from all the other ones out there. Very useful. Very useful. I'm doing some beta testing for a software developer, and they have a Discord channel. And I was like, times are changing, right? Because usually when you're doing some like official testing, they'd have a private forum that they'd host, and there'd be passwords and all sorts of things to ensure that the information was held private. Now they're like, hey, here's a Discord channel. You signed an NDA. You can't share any of this, right?
Remember Facebook? Facebook was, it was something where you as an individual basically put stuff online or whatever, like, well, it was originally MySpace, then Facebook came out, and everyone started using Facebook, but then it wasn't just individuals using it, all of a sudden it was like companies were saying, hey, we got a Facebook page.
Yeah.
Come see us on Facebook, and then suddenly it was like, now it became like a big, advertising thing, like, go check out our Facebook page.
Yep.
Check out new deals and stuff like that. It like completely changed what it was.
You guys know that Facebook actually has a paid subscription for businesses. It is your Facebook experience, but it's really designed for internal communications in a company, right? So instead of using Discord or Slack, you'd have Facebook for Business. I think that's what it's called. And it's almost the exact same functionality as your regular personal Facebook, but it's wholly focused around an internal communications at a company.
I'm trying to find it.
Media Encoder. Here's the easiest way to get to it. Okay, if you go down to your dock, you have your applications folder. If you click on it, it fans it open, and then here's the folder right here. It's the purple one with the little dots on it, next to Lightroom. All right. So I can see that a lot of folks have Media Encoder up and running. Now remember, the purpose behind this one app is designed to take a whole series of image sequences, right, and compress it into a movie file that I then can cut into a film, publish to Facebook or Vimeo. I mean, I can do what I want with it, right? I can put it on my phone. It's a movie file just like any other movie file. The first thing that we need to do, and there's a kind of a two-part sequence here that we need to follow, is that we need to import that file. And we do this over here in the queue. Try really hard to ignore the media browser. Like, just pretend that this part over here doesn't exist. Okay, just ignore it. It's not there, right? But where we want to start is this little plus sign. This is the best and the easiest way to get an image sequence into the app. So plus sign, you'll bring up the standard OS Finder. And now we need to travel to where my image sequence is stored. Now, it's stored on the desktop of your machines. So if I go to the desktop, let's find it, test NMPNG. Now, don't just click on all of them like this, right? Media Encoder is pretty smart. All we need to do is select the first file in this huge list, and it's going to do the rest for us, okay? Remember, it's a purpose-built application. It wants to work with image sequences, so it understands the file that we're giving it. what it's going to do real quickly, it's going to scan the entire folder, and if it notices that we have a repeating file name with an ascending number, it's going to assume that this is a sequence, right? Which it is. Let's hit the open button. Bloop. And check it out. Aha. If you look really carefully at the file name, it says frames 101 to 1062. Rock and roll. So it actually collected all of those individual photographs, and it's now seeing it as one movie file. Rock and roll. Step number 1 complete. Okay? Step number 2 is that we need to tell it which frame rate to play this movie file back at, right? Because when it's just a collection of photographs, there's nothing on the back end of that image sequence that tells the computer, or anything for that matter, how many frames we should be seeing in a second, right? It's going to guess if we don't do this. So we want to tell it that the defined frame rate is 24 for us in the cinema world, right? Let's just do it real fast. It's really, really super easy. It's the part that oftentimes folks overlook. Here's how we do it. If we right-click on the name of our file, you're going to get a contextual menu, and we're going to choose Interpret Footage. At the conclusion of this, we're going to get another little popover. And check it out. Look at this. Assume frame rate from file 29.97. I didn't tell that my image sequence was 29.97, right? This is actually the frame rate for the broadcast television world. It's guessing the frame rate. I don't want 29.97. I want it to play back at 24, right? So what we're going to do is assume frame rate of not 1. We'll do 24. 24 frames per second. That's all we need to do. And hit OK. Now we're lucky that the guys and gals down at Adobe are pretty smart folks. They're very aware of how Media Encoder dovetails into the rest of our production pipeline. And they've given us a really great preset to start off with. Okay, now for what we're doing in this class, this H.264 preset is perfect. Okay, the H.264 preset is actually a codec and a format preset all bundled into one, right? It gets this file into the exact same format that YouTube, Facebook, Vimeo, basically any web hosting platform on the web requires. Okay, so point being, there's really nothing to change. We can change it, and when you start looking at your motion graphics class in the future, we will change it. Okay, but for today, step 1, we're not going to monkey with it. We're just going to leave it as is. All right. So the H.264 preset's perfect for what we're trying to do. The next thing that we need to be aware of is where it's saving the file. Okay? Whenever you see these blue and italics, that's basically Media Encoder saying, click me. I'm a property or a field that we can change. And I just like to click on it. I want to put it on my desktop. It's really important that I know where I'm saving my file. Know where you're saving your file. I don't know where your files are, okay? Only you can prevent forest fires. If you can't find your file, what makes you think I'm going to be able to find your file, okay? So just know where you're saving it. And then we hit the gigantic play button. And it's going to do it. It's going to happen very quickly. Down at the bottom of the application frame, you'll see a little preview. Takes 2 seconds. It goes pretty fast, right? And if we look at what we've physically outputted from the app, there it is. Here's Stephanie's animation looking amazing at the right frame rate and a pretty high quality. So now we've gone through the full loop. Is everyone able to make that file, that little MP4 file? Okay. Remember to interpret the footage? You did it. Great job. Yeah. Say again? Okay. So that's the sequence that we're going to go through for our homework starting today. Okay, starting today. This is what I want you to do. I want you to practice popping out an image sequence from Animate or Photoshop. Okay, either one works for me. Okay. Then bringing that image sequence over to Media Encoder, and then physically creating an MP4 from that file. Okay, this is the complete production pipeline for us. Okay, I know there's a lot of technology involved, but what we're doing is creating a flexible file format that then can be integrated into a traditional cinema world, a traditional television world, We can continue to make little funny web animations as we have with GIFs. The point is that we're now able to make, serve 3 markets from one file. Okay? GIFs only serve one market. And that's the computer animation, the web animation world, which is very bad. The quality's horrible, the frame rate's horrible. I mean, who wants that, right? Unless you're like in the meme business, right? I'm convinced that there's like, honestly, 3 or 4 people that's like what they do all day. They just make memes all day long, right? Because the humor of memes seem to be kind of the same, right? So it's got to be like the same 3 or 4 people. I don't know. I don't have that kind of humor to make memes. I find them hilarious, by the way, but I could never. Anyways, all right. Questions on what we're doing and what we're talking about this week as far as the technology goes. This is absolutely something the student tutors and the coordinators in the design labs are experts at. So if you run into a problem between now and next Tuesday, come find me during office hours. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I have office hours in the morning. You now know where my new office is. Please come find me. I'm here to help. I want to support you. Okay? The folks in the design lab, they are ninjas at this. This is not anything new, and they've been doing this for many years, so they can support you on this as well. Okay? Let's chat about what our homework this week is going to be. Return to Canvas just for one brief moment. All right. So your homework this week is to make a run. Okay? Taking everything that we've learned about walk cycles, both last week's lecture, the review, and the ideas that we talked about today, I want you to craft a run. If you need some help, page 177 in our book is going to provide you with a whole series of excellent illustrations that will serve you in your exploration of the run. Much like we decoded last week, the tempo is really what's most important. The poses aren't that different in all honesty, okay? If you really take a look and start deconstructing the poses, the down pose is pretty extreme. That's a big difference, okay? The contacts and the downs are pretty extreme, okay? Fundamentally, the difference between them is that on the run, we only ever have one foot touching the ground at one time, okay? Unlike the walk, where there's a couple frames where both feet are touching the ground at the exact same time. In addition, the arms are very much up here, right? Shoulder height as we run, okay, to get that wonderful kind of propelling movement as we propel our body forward into these whole series of controlled jumps. That's kind of what a run is, okay? So I want you to explore the tempo. It's up to you to figure out what that tempo is going to be. If you want to do a real fast run, like a six frame per step run, go for it, man. I'm not going to say no. It's a great idea. Or if you want to do like an 8 frame run, do that too. But at the end of the day, you're going to be making a 24 frame loopable cycle of a run. Okay? Continue to practice the pipeline that we discussed about last week with blocking things out. Quickly exploring how all these poses work together to create the sense of locomotion and the sense of movement. As David did earlier, and I think Andrew, they spent their time focusing on skeletal joints. Figuring out where the main joints and how the bones connect those joints are, that's time well spent. Then you can draw on top of it on a new layer. We have a lot of tools now that allow us to get to that final result pretty easily. Okay. At the conclusion of your run this week, however, I want you to create an MP4, okay, or an MOV. Sometimes if you're a PC user, you'll pop out an MOV, which is just fine. It's literally the exact same thing. Okay. The wrapper is the same. That's the only thing. If you think about these video formats as wrappers, an MP4 and an MOV, they are very, very, very similar wrappers. Okay. Anyways, so at the end of this, you're going to be creating an MP4 or an MOV of your run cycle. So a little bit different. The days of the GIF are behind us. Okay. We're no longer making GIFs in here. Everything is going to be an MP4. So please make sure you reference today's live stream. I live streamed today. Find some help if you have some mechanical issues popping out this MP4. It only takes 5 minutes to make it for the type of things that we're doing this week. So it should go pretty quickly.
What's your YouTube again?
Just Pat Crandley. Yep. I'm live streaming at the moment. Just do a search for my name, and you'll find it pretty easily. Sound good? Questions, comments, concerns? So we're making a run this week. No, I explained it that awesome on the first try.
I'm trying to import the image sequence from Photoshop to Animate,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not quite working.
Okay, we can explore that here in a second, for sure. For sure. Any other general questions about the homework? Excellent. I'll see you next week. Have a wonderful week. And happy St. Patrick's Day. It's my favorite holiday of the year because everyone makes me a saint and drinks beer in my honor. Right. No, I'm joking. All right, we'll see you next week.